we'll see what he's able to do in the Superpole session. Obviously, free practice times, they count for something, but they don't count for an awful lot whenever it's all down to this session for the grid.
Niccolo Bulliga, championship leader throughout this season so far, and as we've said, no doubting he's still the man with the pace advantage. Think of the way he demolished the field by 8 seconds in race 1 of the Dutch round, but he doesn't have the points to show for it, does he? Only the 5th highest score in Assen as a result of those 2 mechanical failures.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, the big story from Assen. You can see here Bulliga's first retirement from the Superpole race, the same problem in race 2, and what we've heard from Italian media is it was a crankshaft sensor failure for Bulliga, and Marco Zambernadetti has said that Ducati have gone back to the supplier to try and find a solution for that. They can't afford a repeat of that at any stage through the course of this season, but they are still in the championship advantage. 21 points for Bulliga. He was dominant in terms of his pace in Assen last time around, but he had nothing to show for the Sunday. So that's the challenge facing everyone in World SBK, and even for Bulliga, whenever he's had such a strong start to the season, it's only counted for a 21-point advantage.
Reportedly, testing undertaken by the Ducati test rider, 10-time Italian champion Michele Pirro in Misano, just to ensure that there's no repeat of that feat this weekend, because one weekend you can write off, 2021, 29 in 2022, 33 in 2023, and 27 from his 31 races last year. 9 races this season, he's already dropped out of the rostrum places 4 times, twice at the Dutch round on pure pace, so even gifted points on Sunday in Assen, he couldn't fully capitalise, and that will be a big concern for Toprak.
That's a massive concern for Toprak, and yesterday he was struggling out there for rear grip. You can see him down there with Kevin Schwantz here in the Cremona paddock this weekend, but for Toprak, struggled with rear grip yesterday, started to edge his way towards a solution, but even in this morning's session, still just a little bit further off the pace than he would have wanted. But the Superpole session has been a strength for Toprak over the last few years, front row for every race so far this season. That's what he needs to use as the absolute base for this weekend.
Yeah, big unknown, of course, here in Cremona. It is his first competitive visit to the circuit for Toprak Razgatlioglu. He has struggled in Phillip Island and Assen in the past. He's not had it all his own way at those 2 venues this season, but at a venue where he has gone well previously in Portimao, he was able to walk away with 3 race victories. This is Danilo Petrucci, only 5 points from Sunday in Assen after an electronics issue in the Superpole race, and he was then among several riders who really struggled for tyre life in race 2. But this is the perfect venue for him to bounce back. Home round, of course, for Barni Ducati, based just a 100-kilometre drive east of Milan, and a venue where Petrucci scored his first World SBK win and that famous hat-trick a year ago.
Yeah, last year really was something special for Petrucci. For Barni, you can see the celebrations from last year, and they're out to try and repeat it this year, but Petrucci obviously saying that the goal is to try and make sure you're in the top 5, fight for a podium, and then see what happens. And I think that he certainly felt a little bit more under pressure this weekend than I think he probably would have expected.
Yeah, when asked what percentage chance he gave himself of repeating that feat, I think it was about 1% that he said chance of managing that again. But as you said, podiums have got to be the target for him. Jonathan Rea making his first appearance of the 2025 season. He's missed the first 3 rounds of the campaign due to injury. Sustained multiple fractures to his left foot when he suffered a high side in the Phillip Island test. But as I say, makes a welcome return here. And Yamaha in the ascendancy, particularly after Assen last time out.
Yeah, and really good to have Johnny back here. Obviously, it's a case of trying to get himself up to speed as much as anything else. Big changes to the Yamaha compared to when he rode it in Phillip Island for the test. So he's having to readjust to that. He's obviously trying to get his bike fitness back as well.
Yes, as I say, good moment as things stand for the Yamahas, with Andrea Locatelli enjoying such success last time out in Assen. Will have been slightly galling for Jonathan Rea to sit on the sidelines during the best round of the season so far for the manufacturer, as Locatelli claimed his first World SBK win at the 154th attempt last time out in Assen. 15 third place finishes, 5 second places, and finally a bit of good fortune for Locatelli with Bulliga's retirement, but he did still have to beat the likes of Bautista and Razgatlioglu, so well-deserved reward for Locatelli, who really has ridden the wheels off the unfancied Yamaha this season so far with 3 rostrum results, and he's now up to 3rd in the championship.
Yeah, really strong in Portimao and last time out in Assen, obviously. But Phillip Island was actually a good weekend for him as well. And even though it was 7th and 6th place finishes, he was strong compared to the other non-Ducati riders. That was a circuit where we just saw Ducati dominate. So he was pretty much best of the rest that weekend. And sometimes that's all you can aim for.
Yeah, perhaps the expectations were a little bit higher for Locatelli given how well he went in Phillip Island a year ago. But as you say, Portimao and Assen, a major step forward for him. Alvaro Bautista, 6 podium finishes to his name in 2025 so far. So that's one more than Toprak Razgatlioglu, one less than Nicolo Bulliger. But he's also had 3 non-scores, 2 crashes in feature-length races where the biggest points, of course, are on offer. And he trails the championship lead by 50 points after 3 rounds. This time last year, remember, he led the standings. And Bautista still hasn't beaten teammate Nicolo Bulliger in a straight fight this season.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting reminder as well, just about how quickly things have turned for Bautista and for Ducati. Bulliger's very clearly the Ducati team leader now. And for Bautista, it's about trying to just make sure you're able to get those podiums and try and put yourself back into some sort of contention. For Alvaro, it's about finishing top 3 in the world right now rather than trying to challenge for a world championship.
Riders making their way onto the circuit then for this 15-minute Superpole session. No change in terms of tyre allocation. That is the softest allocation as per the previous round in Assen. Was the harder allocation, remember, in Phillip Island and Portimao. First time out as Alex Lowes makes his way onto the circuit. Superpole specialist, of course, Lowes was only 9th on the grid last time out in Assen. That's his best so far with Bimotor. Has been a tougher time for hooking things up for single lap pace for the Bimotor, but they came on strong at the end of the weekend last time out in Assen.
Yeah, and for those obviously is qualifying this season, the crash and the yellow flags in Portimao kind of skewed some of his results. He was very strong there, needs a good result here this weekend. What was interesting that we saw again goes out with his brother Sam, and Sam's been one of the pace setters all weekend, so that's going to be good for Alex to be able to run with him for these opening stints.
Only one previous Italian round staged here in Cremona. That was back in September, and it was a Ducati front row lockout led by Nicolo Bulliger, Andrea Iannone and Danilo Petrucci alongside him on that occasion. Ducati led every lap. Petrucci took all 3 race wins. This was a strong venue for the Bologna-based manufacturer last season.
Yeah, it was, and certainly what we saw in free practice has been that Ducatis are to the fore. Bautista might have had his 3 crashes. He set the pace in the combined times. Sam Lowes, we see here on the 14, very strong. Bulliger's been really good. And this is a circuit that he says doesn't suit his riding style. It's not ideal for him. He's still able to make it work around here.
Andrea Iannone still 7th in the championship, but 2/3 of his points tally comes from the season-opening Australian round. Since then has added 7th in Portimao, 4 non-scores and a 9th in Assen. So other than that Sunday in Phillip Island, where he was really the closest match to Nicolo Bulliger, Iannone not showing the expected progress in his second World SBK campaign.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing whenever people are talking about what happens next year. Iannone's name has been linked with a few seats, but it seems like it's been linked by Iannone with those seats. And he's talked up a little bit about BMW as of a few other riders, but for Iannone, he needs his results on track to really show what he can do.
Toprak Razgatlioglu making his first competitive visit to Cremona this weekend. Missed the Italian round through injury in 2024 and has only had a brief test here, but he has already been on pole at 13 different venues in World SBK at 6 of the 12 rounds last season on the BMW, and you certainly wouldn't bet against him adding this venue to his list. Always find something a little bit extra for single lap pace.
Yeah, for Toprak, his fastest lap of the weekend so far, 28.7, couple of tenths off that on his first flying lap.
1:28.958 first lap around for Toprak Razgatlioglu. Michael van der Mark only 2/10 of a second back from that. Remy Gardner on a stormer here. He goes provisional pole. It's a 1:28.581 for Gardner. Best part of 4/10 of a second faster than Razgatlioglu. Andrea Locatelli is 3 sectors round on his first effort, in line to move top of the standings if he can hook it up through this tight final sector. And Locatelli, who has not managed to have as good results in Superpole as he has perhaps in races of late, was P6 on the grid last time out in Assen, 5th on the grid here in Cremona last season, crosses the line to go provisional pole, fractionally ahead of Remy Gardner. It's a 1:28.560 for Locatelli. Jonathan Ray slotting himself in behind Razgatlioglu, 10th of a second down on Toprak into the low 1:29. Ray has generally struggled in practice this weekend on his comeback from injury. Alvaro Bautista coming through the final sector, but the man to watch here is Sam Lowes. He's half a second up after 3 completed sectors. Yonone goes provisional P1, but Sam Lowes with a 1 minute 28.081, our pole sitter from Assen last time out, within a 1/10 of a second of the lap record set by Nicolo Bulliger a year ago. And Bulliger's first attempt slots him in 4/10 of a second behind Sam Lowes. Another stunning start to Superpole from Lowes.
Yeah, Lowes always very strong over a single lap in his Moto2 career, and he's been able to show in his Superbike career in the last year just how good he is in that as well. Toprak into his second lap, just into the 28th, and in this morning's free practice session we had 10 riders inside the 28th, and unfortunately for Raz Gadioglu, just those few 10ths of a second that he's missing.
Super performance from Sam Lowes in the early stages of this Superpole session, and now it's a question of catch me if you can. Margin of almost 4/10 of a second to Nicolo Bulliger in second place. Andrea Iannone, after his first flying lap, up onto the front row of the grid, as he was in Cremona here a year ago. Second row of Sting Stand, Andrea Locatelli, Remy Gardner and Alvaro Bautista. All the way down on the third row of the grid of Sting Stand, Toprak, Raz Gatlioglu, either side of him, the Hondas of Lecuona and Vieque.
Yeah, obviously into the Superpole session, this is where everyone needs to find their speed, find what they're able to do, and Danilo Petrucci just about to come across the line, should move up into the top 6 or 7, moves up into 7th spot. Interestingly for Lowes, he's had the fastest first sector and third sector we've had at all through the course this weekend. That was on his first flying lap, so that bodes well for him into his second stint.
Alex Lowes just making his way through the final sector here. He's got Andrea Iannone darting out of his way and back into the pits. Lowes then will have a clean run towards the line, good enough to move P11 and relegate Jonathan Ray down to 12th.
High-speed crash into turn 1 for Lowes this morning as well, so just building himself into this session.
As we see Nicolo Bulliger, your current championship leader, he is up in P2, 1 minute 28.375 last time around, new personal best, so narrows the gap to Sam Lowes with his second flying lap, but not able to bridge the gap that still sits at 3/10.
What's been interesting for Sam on his Mark VDS Ducati is yesterday he really focused on his race pace as well, only used 2 tyres yesterday, didn't try and throw in a fast time, wanted to make sure he did a 20-lap run, so he feels really good on race tyres, and obviously on that Superpole tyre able to put in a really good performance. 2
riders haven't yet set a qualifying time in this first stint of Superpole. Ryan Vickers has been out on track but come back into the pits not having set a flying lap, and as you can see Axel Bassani in the pit box as well.
Yeah, Vickers ran off the track in his first flying lap and came straight back into the pits.
This is Scott Redding. He hasn't yet set a competitive lap time. He's making his way through the final sector now. Could be good enough to move up onto the 5th row of the grid, but some way short of expectations to say the least for Scott Redding.
Yeah, he ran in a bit deep into turn 11, so not a great run through to the end of the lap there for Redding. We'll see what he does when he comes across the line. Should move himself into the top 10.
That's a little bit better for Scott Redding, who was 6th on the grid in Australia, where he's put in his best results of the season so far. Qualified down in 15th in Portugal, 16th in the Netherlands, where he's only managed 2 top 10 finishes over those 2 weekends. So this session, you fancy, will give us a bit of an indication as to the kind of weekend Redding might have here in Cremona.
Yeah, you can see in the timing tower on the left-hand side of the screen, everyone coming back into the pits at the end of their first stint. So we've got a bit of time to take stock of where everyone's at. Sam Lowes fastest of all in Sector 1, and in Sector 2 it's Remy Gardner on the GRT Yamaha that's setting the pace in that sector. Lowes in Sector 3, and then in Sector 4 it's Andrea Iannone. So that also goes to show for someone like Nicolo Bulliger, he's fast in each individual sector. He's able to hook up his full lap without really showing a great turn of speed in any individual sector. It shows that his bike's working well everywhere.
Andrea Locatelli up in 4th position in Superpole at the moment. This would be a good result for him. It would match his best this season so far of P4 in Portimao. Mr. Consistency, Andrea Locatelli, the only man who's scored points in every race this season so far. He's also qualified in the top 8 at all 3 rounds. 2nd row of the grid in Portimao and Assen, and currently 5th place in the Superpole Award. You know what you're getting from Locatelli, a solid performer, and once again up on the 2nd row of the grid as things stand here in Cremona. But what a great display from Sam Lowes, who really struggled at this venue last year, only picked up 5 points, but even then managed to qualify up on the 2nd row of the grid. Is always a front runner in terms of Superpole performances, finds a little bit more perhaps than race results certainly last season, and Lowes again delivering superbly here.
Yeah, last year was that comeback from injury from as well, but at least he's got the experience of the track. Toprak that we ride on board with now said that they've been playing catch-up all the way through this weekend just because they lost that running in last year's race. But Toprak's got a lot of catching up to do. Down there in 10th fastest, he's going to be the first rider out there setting a lap time himself and Michael van der Mark out together. Toprak towed van der Mark for the first stint, and now Van der Mark will return that favour for Toprak, but Razgatlioglu needs to find at least half a second on his next run.
Watching Remy Gardner making his way round the circuit on an installation lap here. Gardner with 2 third-row grid slots so far this season. That's got to be the minimum target out of this. He's 5th place at the moment, so with an opportunity to do somewhat better than that. Alvaro Bautista just starting his second stint. Bautista, who has qualified somewhat better this campaign so far than he did last year, averaged only 10th in Superpole in 2024, hasn't yet been outside of the front 3 rows of the grid this season, was 5th last time out in Assen, still chasing his first front row start since Aragon in September, and that's the last time we really saw the Alvaro Bautista of old as well.
Yeah, unfortunately for Alvaro, those crashes yesterday didn't really get to show what he could fully do out there, but his speed here this weekend has actually been pretty impressive. Set the pace on the combined times. He needs to just make sure he's able to qualify in those front 2 rows of the grid. As it is right now, 6th on the grid for Bautista, it wouldn't be the end of the world. We've seen him down on that 3rd and 4th row of the grid. He needs to just make sure he's able to consolidate his pace on this run now.
Alvaro Bautista 1.5 tenths of a second down at the halfway mark on this lap. All about the second half of the lap now. He's half a second down compared to Sam Lowes in P1. How many positions might Alvaro Bautista be able to make up here? 4.5 minutes to go in Superpole. The second stint's underway. What a second sector that is from Remy Gardner.
Yeah, and Remy on his first stint was the fastest rider of all in Sector 2, and he's doing the same again on this stint. We'll see what happens for him in the rest of the lap, because on their previous best he lost a lot of time in Sector 3, lost by 3 tenths to Sam Lowes.
Alvaro Bautista, 3rd of a second down after 3 completed sectors. He'll be the first rider to hit the line in this second stint of Superpole. Bautista, who qualified down in 13th place here last season, still climbed to take 2 podiums. He does go well here, as he showed in practice this morning. Crosses the line for P2, slots himself in ahead of Nicolo Bulliger. Bulliger's second stint still to come, but Bautista sits in P2 on 1 minute 28.369. Remy Gardner's lost a lot of ground, 4 tenths of a second through Sector 3. See what he can get now coming off the final turn. He drives his way towards the line. Remy Gardner only up to 5th position, so it is a new personal best, but he only gets ahead of Yamaha stablemate Andrea Locatelli, who's now relegated down to 6th place. Toprak Razgatlioglu at the halfway mark on his latest lap, as is Michael van der Mark ahead of him on track, and Ika Lekawona behind. They're all in line to set new personal bests at this time around. We ride on board into the heavy braking zone now and through the final sector. We wait to see whether Razgatlioglu can make up ground on the leaders. Sam Lowes with a 1 minute 28.081 is the time to beat. Toprak Razgatlioglu, pole sitter at the Portuguese round, hasn't qualified off the front row since Aragon last year, and he's back on the front row provisionally here in Cremona. It's a 128.159, so it's not good enough to unseat Sam Lowes from top spot, but it's a good second half of the lap, particularly good final sector from Razgatlioglu.
Yeah, Toprak losing a bit of time in that first sector, but we know that's where Sam was really strong in his first run. But the most important thing for Toprak, like it is for Alvaro Bautista, we see now, they've been able to put themselves in with a decent lap time that gives themselves that opportunity to be up at the front of the grid. But Nicolo Bulliger is out on track, and he's slightly up at the halfway point of the lap.
Alvaro Bautista won't improve on his second lap of his second stint. He's 2 tenths of a second down on his previous best. Sits in P3 for the moment. It's Sam Lowes from Toprak Razgatlioglu and Alvaro Bautista with 2.5 minutes remaining. The lap going away from Nicolo Bulliger in Sector 3.
A rider to keep an eye on is Scott Redding, because he's behind Lowes on track. Lowes at the halfway point up by a few hundredths of a second. Scott Redding's got a really good benchmark to use in front of him.
Lekawona and van der Mark also going well at this stage of their final stints, as Bulliger actually crossed the line and finds something extra in the final sector. So a new personal best to pit Bautista and onto the front row of the grid for Nicolo Bulliger. Sam Lowes, Toprak Razgatlioglu, Nicolo Bulliger, your new top 3. Scott Redding just making his way through Sector 3 now as Xavi Vierge puts himself up into P5. Good round last time out in the Netherlands for Honda, and Vierge optimistic of continuing that recent run here. Yannone rounds out the second row of the grid, now down in 6th place. Gardner and Locatelli bumped onto the 3rd row with Michael van der Mark. Ika Lekwaona's just past van der Mark, that's for P9. And we wait to see Scott Redding just making his way through the final sector. Redding will cross the line, but it's only good enough for P11 with 1.5 minutes to go.
Yeah, Lowes' lap time there still faster than anyone else has done so far. That's Dom Yagan, and that looks like it's at the start of the lap, maybe turn 1 or turn 2. So that's going to have brought out the yellow flags for anyone on a lap right now.
Yes, that will be cleared now, and a little bit too late for some, of course, with just over a minute remaining on the clock. Sam Lowe's leading the way ahead of Toprak Razgatlioglu and Nicolo Bulliger, and it looks as though Dominic Egerton's not alone in a spill in that first sector. Taz McKenzie also walking away, although limping away in his case.
That's going to make it very difficult to get two bikes cleared by those same marshals down there at that corner. So now it comes down to Bulliger in the final sector. He was a really good final sector last time around.
Nicolo Bulliger, our best qualifier this season so far, hasn't been out of the top two in Superpole at any round, beaten only by Razgatlioglu in Portimao and Lowe's in Assen. The man to beat here with just 40 seconds remaining. He's gone fastest. It's provisional pole for Nicolo Bulliger and a new lap record, beating his time for pole position a year ago. A 1:27.866 for Nicolo Bulliger as he chases his 6th Superbike pole and his 2nd of the campaign. Sam Lowe's relegated to 2nd, Razgatlioglu into 3rd. A familiar top 3, but a different order.
Yeah, and the yellow flags look like they've been cleared out at turn 2 now, so everyone might have time for one last fast lap, so we need to keep an eye on the 14 of Sam Lowe's.
Yeah, it's up to those just crossing the line now, of course, to try and make an improvement late on. It's going to be difficult to do this deep into a stint with the softest Pirelli rubber. Nicolo Bulliger just moving out of the way. Now the checkered flag will fall. Andrea Locatelli managed to start another lap. He's into sector 2 now. Danilo Petrucci as well. Petrucci in particular, disappointing down in P13. Needs a big recovery ride here.
Yeah, and for Petrucci, we'll wait and see if he's able to come through here at the end, but too much traffic in front of him. It looks like he's lost too much time in sector 2.
Yeah, Xavi Vierque directly in his path. Vierque having already qualified in 5th place. So it doesn't look as though Petrucci or Locatelli will improve, and you can see Petrucci again getting tucked up behind. Vierque makes his way through on the inside line now, but it's too late to make an impression. Watch out for Sam Lowe's as well. Did get through in the first sector, close. He's dropped a couple of tenths of a second in sector 2. He is 2 tenths down on Nicolo Bulliger, remember, in Superpole as things stand.
3rd flying lap on this side of tyre is going to be very difficult to keep that rubber alive all the way through this stint. So for Lowe's, he can be pretty happy with the middle of the front row.
Yeah, great job from him. Climbed up to 3rd in the Superpole award last time out in Assen after a first pole at the Dutch round, and followed up with a podium, of course, in the Superpole race. This is the late effort from Danilo Petrucci. It's a 1:29.349. Just looked as though he got held up by Xavi Vierque, and he is protesting that, but I'm sure Vierque will argue that he was trying to put in another lap as well, but it was over 2 seconds slower than his best in that session.
Yeah, for Xavi there, 30.6, so just lost a bit of time in that middle sector, but it's also one of those things where in the Superpole session, when you've so many riders out on track together, that's one of the risks you have.
And the nature of Cremona as well. Shortest circuit of the season, a lot of tight areas of the track, particularly that infield section.
A lot of corners that lead one into the other as well, so it is tricky to find some space out there when you've got 24 riders out on track pretty much all together at certain points during the Superpole session.
Particularly bad news for Petrucci, though. You think back to last season, he was P3 in Superpole here a year ago and went on to his best ever weekend. And from the evidence of yesterday, you would have thought that he'd be fast enough to get onto the front row.
Toprak was the first rider out of the pits, and he was able to make it work for him to get himself onto the front row of the grid. Petrucci was one of the later riders to get out, so maybe a little bit of a strategy issue there for the Barney team as well, something they'll learn for the future.
So checkered flag falls, and we're going through your 1, 2, 3. Nicolo Bulliger with pole position, a 1:27.866, 2 tenths of a second faster than Sam Lowe's, a 1:28.081. Toprak Razgatlioglu less than a tenth of a second down on Sam Lowe's for P3. And for a while there, it looked as though Alvaro Bautista was going to be back on the front row of the grid for the first time since Aragon last year. Ultimately, he comes away with 4th position. 3rd time in 4 rounds that Bautista's qualified on the 2nd row of the grid. That's a decent effort for him.
Yeah, and it's really important for Alvaro to qualify well like that. Just looking at the times as well, Sector 2, Bulliger through turns 8, 9 and 10. He's 2 tenths of a second faster than anyone else. The margin between himself and Lowe's 2 tenths of a second. He's strong there. He's strong in the final sector. But all the way through yesterday's running, Bulliger was very good through turn 7, 8, 9, 10, and then down that back straight. So that's where he's really proven to make the bit of a difference out there on his Ducati.
And Nicolo Bulliger doing particularly well, because it looked in each stint as though it was going away from him, and then he was able to pull something back and still find those 2 tenths of a second against Sam Lowe's. It looked to all intents and purposes as though Lowe's had got the job done for pole there.
Yeah, it was a really good effort from Sam to set that time on his first flying lap, basically. So to be able to do that, and then you give yourself the option then in the second stint where you might catch a bit of traffic, you've given yourself that bit of leeway. But just looking at the times as well, half a second between Bulliger and Bautista. The next half second takes you all the way down to the 5th row of the grid in Yari Montella. The likes of Alex Lowe's and Jonathan Ray there 1.1, 1.2 seconds off the pace. And suddenly, if they were able to find those few tenths of a second, they jump right up to the front of the grid. It's really close around here for single lap pace.
Yeah, you